And this is where our European friends and allies are going to have to fill the gap. Europe already provides more than 50% of the aid that goes to Ukraine anyway. And if you add together the combined economies of the EU plus UK plus Canada, it dwarfs what Russia has. So this is about political will, not a
Mm.
lack of industrial capacity. My concerns about security, of course, starts with NATO. There is a record of the former President Trump challenging American commitment to NATO, doing things that I think were hurtful or damaging to the cohesion of the alliance, and
Mm.
that's a gift to the Kremlin. Now, I don't know if he will continue on that path when he does become president again, but I'm not optimistic. And so we do face the possibility, not likely, but a possibility that the alliance could even fracture in the next couple of years, absent strong, committed, unquestionable American participation.
I mean, I'll be speaking a bit later on to Ambassador John Bolton. I've spoken to John Bolton on this subject in the past. He's been of the view that a second Trump term in office could break the relationship with NATO. I wonder if that might be just a bit over the top. I mean, as we've seen in the past, has been fair to say that Donald Trump's bark is sometimes worse than his bite, and he has driven NATO members to spend more on their own defense, which is not altogether a bad thing.
Well, of course, I disagree. It's not Trump that caused nations to spend more on defense. It was a growing a realization by European countries finally that Russia is a threat, and so they have to respond to that threat. It wasn't Donald Trump. Otherwise, Germany,
Mm.
who received most of his abusive attention, would be well over 2%. So. I think when it comes to defense spending, it only comes when there is a clear-eyed, sober understanding of the threat. And I think now many European countries are realizing that if they cannot depend on the United States for whatever reason, the threat doesn't go away. In fact, it grows. And that's why you see Eastern European countries who live next to Russia
Mm.
and have that history with Russia, they're not confused about the threat. And that's why they're
Yeah.
spending as much as they can. It's those that are a little bit further away from Russia that are somehow still have their head in the sand.
Yeah. Donald Trump has famously said that he means to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Now, let's not take that strictly literally, and maybe put the point that Ukraine surely can't be forced to deal with Vladimir Putin entirely against its will, General, can it?
So, first of all, I would challenge you, John, on you're giving him a pass that many other Trump enablers and even American media have done. Like, well, he doesn't really mean that. I think he
Mm-hmm.
means everything he says, partly because he knows he'll never be held accountable for it. I mean, I got into a debate last night with a couple of people. We were at the same place, and when I challenged them on something Trump said, they go, "Oh, come on, he doesn't really mean that." I think he absolutely means what he said. But you are correct that he cannot force Ukraine to do something. But what he can do, which will increase the pressure on Ukraine, is to cut off all American aid. Now, or figure out some way to delay it or use it as leverage. And this is where our European friends and allies are going to have to fill the gap. Europe already provides more than 50% of the aid that goes to Ukraine anyway. And if you add together the combined economies of the EU plus UK plus Canada, it dwarfs what Russia has. So this is about political will, not a
Mm.
lack of industrial capacity.
Okay. Now, last time we spoke, General, you gave it as your view that your fellow generals, admirals, US and Navy generals, flag officers would resign their commissions rather than pledge some kind of unquestioning obedience to Donald Trump. Do you still believe that? And if you're right about that, what do you imagine would be the sort of deal breakers to bring that about?
Well, I think what I said was I am concerned that the Trump administration will sack all of the current leadership, military leadership, which it is his prerogative to do, by the way, just to be clear.
Mm.
The president gets to choose who he wants as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, for example, or the Army chief. In fact, all general officers are nominated by the president and then confirmed by the Senate. So it is his prerogative. What concerns me is that if he comes in and, which is not the tradition, and just sack everybody,
Sure.
uh, um, that means, in my view, that he's going to be looking for officers who will pass some sort of litmus test. And I base that on
Yes.
all the criticisms I've heard of General Milley, for example, one of the best soldiers we ever produced. And now Milley is on the famous retribution list. So I think there will be officers who will be asked some sort of litmus test if they're going to be nominated to be chief of the Army or chief of naval operations or chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Yeah.
And when I hear that, then I think, okay, I hope an officer will resign rather than pass a litmus test other than continuing to swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. If there's a personal thing like, do you believe that the last election was stolen, or will you do whatever the president says regardless? I don't want to know an officer that would swear that sort of or pass that kind of a litmus test.
All right. Let me just lastly, and thanks again for your time this afternoon. Just on the question of European security, a matter of very close interest with those of us from the United Kingdom. Is Europe maybe over-reliant? Just want to put the question to you for your thoughts. Is Europe over-reliant on American support? Have a listen to this. This is the former British Minister for the Armed Forces, the Conservative, James Heappey. He had this assessment when he was speaking on Times Radio.
The US is not simply looking for Europe to step up and have European security covered. The US can never turn its back on its Atlantic seaboard. So the US is always going to be a Euro-Atlantic actor. What people in Congress want to see is Europeans not just bank that the US Navy will keep the sea lines of communication to their Far East markets open gratis, and that we can all carry on selling BMWs or whatever to countries in that part of the world. They want to see European-flagged warships in the Straits of Malacca, in the South China Sea, contributing to Indo-Pacific security in return for America's contribution to Euro-Atlantic security.
That's James Heappey. Your thoughts, General?
Well, I agree 100% with what James Heappey just said. Look, for the United States, this transatlantic relationship is not a gift from the U.S. to Europe. The United States depends on a strong, prosperous, stable Europe for our own economic purposes. And because we don't have enough capacity to do everything around the world, we need allies. And most of our best and most reliable allies are in Europe, as well as Canada and Australia. So this is a situation where I'm worried that the administration we may cut off our nose to spite our face and turn our back on Europe, which only will damage us. And so this is what alliances are supposed to do: is people to have shared interests, common interests. And it is fair for American voters to complain a little bit that, hey, where are our British friends? Where are the Germans? Where are the Norwegians? How come they're not out there as well?
All right, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, so good to have your company on the program today.
Thanks, John.